So Fox News is now openly defending convicted war criminals. This is really, really sad. Let's watch and then I'll break it down for you.
Back in 2007, 4 Blackwater contractors were tasked with defending American diplomats at the height of the Iraq War. Remember, 2007, dangerous times. The men were found guilty of killing Iraqi civilians, but they maintained their innocence, saying they were ambushed. Our next guests are telling the Blackwater story in the podcast, the brand new podcast out today, Raven 23, Presumption of Guilt. The creators and producers, Michael Flaherty and Gina Keating, join us now. Thank you both for being here. I've learned a lot about this story. Listen, this show's covered Eddie Gallagher, Matt Goldstein, Clint Lawrence, guys in prison for things, for questionable situations. This one's as bad as it gets. Explain what happened. Raven 23 is the call sign of these 4 contractors. What happened in Iraq that day?
They were called to clear a route so that a diplomat who was at a location that had just been bombed could come through and go safely to the green zone.
So that person had just been bombed and they're evacuating.
Exactly.
And this is in September when there was an average of 2 attacks a day, and they had developed a great new technique where they would detonate a car bomb, people would swarm to go protect people, and then they would ambush them.
Secondary ambush.
Exactly. So they get to this traffic circle, Nusur Square, and are immediately fired upon. And then a car comes through the stop traffic, and they believe it's a car bomb. They fire at it, they neutralize the threat, and then one of their vehicles is disabled. They tow it out, go back to the green zone, don't think anything about it, because this sort of thing happens every day in Iraq.
Another day on the job in Iraq. I was in Iraq 05, 06. Encountered situations just like this. Split-second decisions, violence happened fast, enemy using nasty tactics.
Okay, just understand, their description of events is dead wrong. Dead wrong. And you could tell by the language, they drop hints in there too as to what they're really doing. They, quote, neutralized the threat, is one of the things they said there. Neutralized the threat. Oh, they didn't think anything of it. It was just another day in Iraq. It's just another day in Iraq. This is the language that they're using. Now, are you sitting down? Because I'm going to tell you what actually happened in this situation. By the way, I also highly recommend you have to read Jeremy Scahill's book called Blackwater. It's about Blackwater. Blackwater it's basically a private mercenary army that we were using for security in Iraq. And they're a lot more unaccountable than even our military is. So they kind of got away with a lot of insane stuff. Now, do you have any idea how hard it is to go after anybody on the U.S. side of a war and do it successfully? And these are people who were found guilty. So think about how over the top their actions had to be found guilty. Because virtually all the time, our side gets away with it and there's no justice. Okay? Just understand that. That's an incredibly important point. And what I would ask these guys is, can you name a single thing that the U.S. has ever done that you would say, okay, you know what, that crossed the line and that's illegal and there should be consequences? That's my question for these people, for Peter Hegseth and for these other 2 people here. That's my question for them. Can you name a single thing that anybody on the U.S. side of a war has ever done that you would say, you know what, that's immoral, that's unethical, that's illegal, and they should go to prison for it? Simple question. You know what their answer would be? Because they wholeheartedly believe we're the good guys by definition, so whatever tactics we use are okay. Because we mean well, and we're the good guys, and that's it. That's all that matters. Everything else is just noise. So, again, read Jeremy Scahill's book, Blackwater, to get a full picture of what really happened in the Nusur Square massacre. And it really explains to you what Blackwater is, because not only is it a private mercenary army, it's also kind of run by a Christian fundamentalist. So stop and think about that picture. Christian fundamentalist in what's viewed as Muslim holy lands and functioning as a mercenary private army. Yeah, nothing wrong there. Okay, now, in the Nusur Square massacre, these Blackwater agents were convicted on killing 14 unarmed civilians in a barrage of gunfire in a crowded Baghdad traffic circle in 2007. This, at the time, drew massive international condemnation in the Iraq War. This is when every other country was like, all right, you know what? We can't assist the U.S. in any way, shape, or form here. This is just wrong. Now, according to prosecutors, and they heard from other people who knew Slatton, who's one of the main characters who was convicted here, he had told members of his team that, quote, Iraqi people's lives are not worth anything, and they're not even humans. They are animals. He also expressed no remorse for the killings in a September 2017 interview with USA Today, saying the only massacre was, quote, a massacre of justice against him. Now, I want to be crystal clear about something. Here's what's not at all debatable. It is a stone-cold fact. 14 unarmed civilians were massacred. That's a fact. Now, how you interpret that is up to you. But I want you to notice something about this Fox News segment. Did they ever bring up 14 unarmed civilians were killed? And let me just be clear, that segment goes on longer. I didn't show you the whole thing for time purposes, but they go on, and they go on to like blame Biden and Hillary or something for these people going to prison. And it's like, okay, well then this is a rare instance where we should be thanking Biden and Hillary, but I digress from that. They never mention that 14 unarmed civilians were killed. You would think that when the conversation is the guilt or innocence of the Blackwater people who did this, that you would have to bring up that 14 unarmed civilians were killed. Now, they can say, hey man, 14 unarmed civilians were killed, but it was a total accident. That's an argument they can make, but they didn't even make that argument. They didn't make that argument. They didn't even bring up that 14 unarmed civilians were killed. Why? Because they have no point. So they just use the language of full dehumanization. Oh, they neutralized the threat. What threat is there when there's 14 unarmed civilians? Is there a threat there? There's no threat there. That's not a threat. That's not a threat. They neutralized the threat. Oh, they didn't think anything of it. It was just another day in Iraq. Well, maybe that's the problem. Maybe the problem is that was another day in Iraq. And there was a slaughter of 14 unarmed civilians. Maybe that's the problem. Have you thought about that? No, of course you haven't, because you're playing for a team. Team USA, always right and always good all the time, no matter what. And we don't need to hold our people accountable because we're the good guys. This is embarrassingly pathetic. Fox News is now openly defending convicted war criminals. That's what they're doing. 14 unarmed civilians, they didn't even mention them. When the topic is whether or not these Blackwater people were guilty of a crime. What crime? Why don't you explain what the crime was? Because I got news for you. If they admitted that there were 14 unarmed civilians who were killed, best case scenario, they would say, hey man, okay, 14 unarmed civilians were killed, but you know what? It was a total accident, so I think they should get a lighter sentence. It's not murder, it's manslaughter. So I think they should get a lighter sentence and they should be out sooner. Again, if they wanted to make that argument, I wouldn't agree with that argument, but they could make that argument, and it's a more reasonable argument than not even mentioning the 14 unarmed civilians being killed. This is pathetic, and this is embarrassing. And Fox News is simply defending American war crimes and American war criminals now. What's supposed to make the United States of America good is, oh, we believe justice is blind. So we try to hold ourselves to the standard that we hold everybody else to. That's what we're supposed to be in an ideal scenario. Where, no, we believe justice is blind. It applies to everybody. We're not doing favoritism or anything like that. We're not tribalist idiots who say when we do it, it's always okay. But that is what we're doing. And that is exactly what these people are doing. And they're lying and obfuscating in the process and acting like they didn't do anything wrong ever. You know who knows more about this situation than these people? The ones who found them guilty. That's who knows more about this situation. They were presented with all the evidence. And they went, oh, guilty. So don't give me this bullshit. They're flat out defending American war crimes and American war criminals, which is pathetic. This is a rare instance where we actually got some justice because it was so over the top. By the way, again, if you read Jeremy Scahill's accounting of events, and he did the legwork, he actually went and learned and spoke to people and figured out everything and pieced it together. When you read his account, it reads a lot more like, almost like a horror movie, where from the perspective of those 14 unarmed civilians, it's absolutely terrifying. An occupying force in your country. And they just randomly open fire on you in a marketplace and 14 unarmed civilians are killed. Because there's a culture of dehumanization. The Blackwater people fostered a culture of dehumanization where they even come out and say it. They're animals. They're not people. Iraqi people's lives are not worth anything. Yeah, you know who says that? Somebody who doesn't mind pulling that trigger without having all the facts and doesn't care about the consequences? Well, now, when they're facing justice and they're suffering consequences for their actions, you need a massive propaganda effort to try to convince people that wasn't the case. Well, you're bullshitters. We know you're bullshitters, and this is absolutely pathetic. This is too far. Even for Fox News, this is too far. But there you have it. Fox News, openly on the side of war crimes and war criminals.